Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Carr. Director Garcia.
Present.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Present.
Director Herndon.
Present.
Director Leonard.
Present.
Director O'Halloran.
Here.
Director Simpson is excused for tonight's meeting. Vice President Taylor.
Physically in attendance.
President Peterson.
Present.
We have 7 present.
The chair will now ask the secretary to lead us in the recitation of Pledge of Allegiance. Members, please mute your devices.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I now say our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that that Milwaukee lies on traditional Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk homeland along the southwest shores of Lake Michigan, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. On this site, the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnick rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's Menominee, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Oneida, and Mohican sovereign nations remain present today. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
MTS buildings remain closed to the public. However, board members may be participating from Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public participation as possible, this meeting is being broadcast on radio station WYMS 88.9 FM via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we move to our agenda, I would like to ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of the following members of the MPS community. Ilan Jamal Cashwright, a 7th grade student at Morris Middle School. Joshua Daniel Banda, a teacher at Marshall High School. Arlene Barones, a retired social work aide. Bonnie Hanowski, a retired educational assistant at Clement Avenue School. Brenda Giles, a paraprofessional at Our Avenue Elementary School. Jacqueline Kimbrough, a food service assistant at Milwaukee School of Languages. Minnie Lyles, a retired teacher at Brown Street Academy. Daniela Parker, a 6th grader at Townsend School. Nasir Scott, a 6th grader at Obama SCTE. Jeanette Swan, a retired teacher at Kazi Middle School. Thank you. We'll now move on to the items of business on our agenda. As is customary, no public testimony is taken at board meetings. For our listening audience, if you wish to access the evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting esb.milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Now let us begin. Madam Secretary, what is our first item of business?
The first item of business on the agenda is action on the minutes of the September 2021 regular and special meetings of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Do any members of the board have corrections for the minutes of September 2021? There being no corrections, those minutes are approved as presented. If there are no objections from the board, okay, no objections, they're approved. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communication from the superintendent?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have two communications from the superintendent. The first communication is the monthly report with possible action from the Superintendent of Schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the superintendent please present the report?
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. This month, we celebrate some things that are very important to the MPS family, including Hispanic Heritage Month, National Principals Month, HBCU Week. There were many activities throughout the district as well to learn, and as well as learning opportunities to showcase and honor Hispanic heritage and show our appreciation for our school leaders and to learn more about HBCUs. Also would like to remind you that, just a reminder that the middle and high school enrollment for early admissions is open through October 31st. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to David Solifa-Ferrick to give us a transportation update. David?
Good evening, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Fife-Ferrick, Director of Business and Transportation Services. Obviously, I'm here to give an update on the status of the transportation services for the district. I'll try to keep it concise, and I'll leave you up for questions, of course. And I guess the mantra is that we continue to see progress. In fact, I'll just throw a couple numbers at you. Right now, as of yesterday, we were 18 buses short. So that is a far cry from when we started just about 6 weeks ago, I think was our peak, September 9th, where we were roughly 100 buses short. And so we continue to make significant progress in that regard. Those 18 buses typically are the ones that are the hardest to address. And we have, in conjunction with the ongoing issues with those particular situations, issued 800 contracts to families so that they could be considered for alternate transportation options. Obviously, these transportation contracts are paying families for the services while we continue to stabilize our workforce. And those were actually delivered earlier this week. We started to get calls by family members, just trying to get some information about kind of the logistics of all of that. Once those contracts get signed and returned, that's when we start the distribution process for those particular families. It's rather interesting to see that in the 2 weeks that we did those 800 contracts, we had 13 routes out of the first 47 that we identified in the distribution process, and that's not the totality of what our contracts entail, but 13 of them already had drivers by the time we facilitated the process. So it just goes to show kind of the fluid nature of kind of how this is all evolving. And so we go ahead and issue the contracts based on information that we had from October 1st. And by the time we had issued and kind of facilitated the totality of that process, many of those families already got a communication about a yellow bus that has since been established. And so we anticipate that to be consistent between now and perhaps the end of November. And my goal obviously is if we're making that level of progress, the goal would be in the month of November to flush out supply and demand. I will point out that we are probably at an all-time high with human service vehicle and alternate transportation. Those are a little bit more accessible, a little bit quicker turnaround in those regards. And so I probably end up coming back to the board later in the year to increase some of those contract values because we've just utilized those way more than we have anticipated in the past. And it has actually been very, very helpful for us, obviously, for stabilizing some of our service deliveries. So at that point, I guess I can stop there and answer any questions you might have.
Committee members, does anybody have a question they would like to ask the administration? Sequana, Vice President Taylor.
We know each other so well. Thank you, President Peterson. Glad to hear that we are rapidly approaching this, and thank you for all your work. I know it's definitely challenging. When we say 18 buses short, how many routes does that accumulate to, or what schools?
Vice President Taylor, members of the board, David Solik, Fife Eric, Director of Business and Transportation Services. In a three-tier system, and not every one of them is three-tier, 18 buses is about 54 routes. That was the number that I had as of yesterday. And that, is a representation of kind of that distribution that we had in the past. About 20% would have been special ed and 75% regular ed. And again, just to elaborate, it's not the same bus routes, right? Is the challenge nowadays is kind of like the call-off scenarios, is who's going to call off where, and then how do you distribute those standbys. And so we did identify in our parent contracts basically the way that we had determined how to move forward was highest impact, most frequency, right? The ones that had the highest frequency, they go first, right? And then we scale back and kind of distribute based on the amount of funds that were allocated to that purpose, and then maximize the number of recipients that would receive those parent contracts in that process.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, just really quick. Thank you. So I know you said it's 54 routes, so I just want to make sure that we're clear in for those listening. That is not like the specific school, and I'll just use one of mine. It's not like it would be, let's just say Obama and King, that the routes, but it's sporadically throughout the district that it's 18 buses short.
Administration.
Vice President Taylor, members of the board, that is correct. We obviously are trying to remain stable in those identification, because it doesn't do me any good to issue a parent contract if the route continues to change. And so once we've identified a route that may have a standby that could float to it, if we've issued a parent contract for that route and we get authorization from the family to go ahead and transport on their own on behalf of the district, then the idea would be to maintain the lack of a driver until we have an established driver for that route, if that makes sense. And so we obviously could float on a good day a driver to that route, but once I've established a parent contract for that family and they've agreed to go ahead until we stabilize, I'd rather repurpose that driver for a random one-off call-in sick, if you will. So although there is variability, once we identify the routes that we are offering parent contracts for, the expectation is those routes remain without a driver until we have a permanent driver, assuming every family has agreed to transport on their own.
Anything else? Any other questions by board members? Yes, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I'm curious, so I know we're working on this year, and it's an atypical year. It's kind of, we're experiencing more disruptions than normal. But going forward, does administration, I would be curious to hear if administration would recommend revisiting the way we bus, because this seems to not just be, although this is an atypical year, it seems that busing can be an issue in any given year. And so I would be curious to know if there's any review process on what our policies are, and if the board would, should anticipate hearing more about this going forward.
Administration.
Director O'Halloran, President Peterson, members of the board, I've come to this to the board a number of years trying to explore ways to reduce transportation expenditures and redirect dollars into the classroom. I fully expect that conversation to continue. Obviously, there's a lot of specific exceptions to that rule, and so I think that, is the time ripe to evaluate the way that we do services and how we identify schools' busing arrangements? Absolutely. That being said, I know that that's a unique circumstance in the city of Milwaukee. It becomes very, very difficult to dismantle that arrangement. I think that's how we ended up restructuring rather than reducing in past board items. So, of course, I would continue to offer suggestions that I see fit based on kind of trending and some demographic visuals that might help in that assistance. But I do honestly think that we really are not going to experience a significant issue moving forward once we have kind of right-sized again. So, I mean, we're 200 buses down, and we're still functioning at a pretty high level. So as the year continues to progress, I feel like although timing and some of these issues are going to probably exacerbate themselves as the weather conditions get worse, we are making meaningful gains, I guess, in the market area. And I think we have positioned ourselves to utilize those human service vehicles in a way now that we've never used them before, given that that has been a really high demand area for us. There are opportunities perhaps to supplement in ways that we haven't in the past. And, you know, I could always come back to the board and give different options to that regard. County Transit continues to be a mechanism that we can use long-term, but I don't, how can I phrase this? I don't think that if we maintained where we're at and we continue to use the three-tier system, I don't really think that, you know, come next year or following that we will experience anything to this magnitude, probably, hopefully in my tenure.
President Peterson and members of the board, one of the things that we are constantly looking at is how can we fine-tune what we're doing? How can we be more efficient? One of the things that we have asked of David is to provide us with the on-time stops throughout the year and throughout the week to look at that volume. Also, in conversation with the Council of Great City Schools, all large urban districts are facing the same dilemma, and we kind of talking about what are some of the lessons learned, what are some of the things that we need to look at. And yes, there will be things that will be coming back. We are coming back to the board. We got a date set to be coming back to kind of talk about transportation, and that is some of the time that we will start to address some of those concerns and try to look at what we can do to make sure that all of our students are on time every day and on task for a mission for learning at school.
Administration, you said there was a date set already, or is going to be a date set?
President Peterson and members of the board, there was a request early on the date to come back after we got rolling. I don't know if it's in November or December, but it's sometime soon upcoming that we were going to come back and talk about transportation.
Thank you. Other question or follow-up, Director O'Halloran?
Thank you. And I just want to make sure that people understand that when we talk about this, it is partially about finding efficiencies so that we can invest more dollars in our classrooms. But at this point, it's also looking at a workforce issue and making sure that we're not making promises that we can't deliver on. And so I would rather review our policies to make sure that students are getting to school rather than maintaining status quo, because that's what it's been. So it's not, rather than making it sound like it's just a dollars and cents issue, I just want to make sure that people understand it's also about making sure our students get to school. So with that, I'll pass.
Thank you. Other comments? Anybody else wish to ask a question or comment on transportation? Okay.
And I would,
Wait,
go ahead.
Yes, Director O'Halloran.
Can I ask a question not related to transportation, but related to the superintendent's report?
Is the superintendent done with his report?
I have one other item,
Oh,
but
okay.
you can go ahead with the question. I'm good.
Okay, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. One of the topics in the report was about, well, actually, I guess I have a couple questions. But one of them was about the middle and high school enrollment that's going on. I did field questions from concerned parents about attendance for seventh graders. And so I was just wondering, I know that fits into the criteria for the high schools. Has that been reviewed in light of COVID? Just some parents are concerned if their student misses because they're close contact or they're keeping their kid home because they have the sniffles. They're just concerned about that. Has that been explored as a topic?
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, yes. I've been in conversation with Dr. Mail as well as Mr. Boswell. We will not be penalizing any student based on around the attendance piece. Anything that that is part of the pandemic is something that we have made adjustments for.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran, another question.
My one final question was about the vaccine part of the update. How was the vaccine incentive communicated? I've seen it on social media a bunch of times, and I want to thank you for that. Was it also emailed or sent out through Class Dojo to make sure that parents are aware, or not just parents, sorry, families and caregivers are aware of this program and how to register their students?
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, yes, there was a list that was set out by communications with a number of different avenues to make sure that families are very much aware of what's, about the incentive and how they can get the incentive. They've also made it their business to make sure it's always mentioned in the Friday updates, the Friday letters to families. And there's one going out as early as tomorrow, I understand, and it has it in there as well. So we have really pushed that particular piece to make sure that students were taking part of it.
Any other questions, Director O'Halloran? Okay, administration, you want to complete your report, please?
Yes, I would like to conclude my report by recognizing an outstanding individual, Ms. Sue Saller, who is, Sue, if you could come up to the mic. And Sue has 25 years of dedicated service with the Milwaukee Public Schools, and my motto for Sue is always being kind and holding all the moving parts with grace. And she has truly been amazing. I started work with Sue 18 years ago, and when I walked in, I was quickly told, if you want to get something done, go to see Sue Saller. And that was 100% correct. And ever since that time, she has been there doing what needs to be done. No matter what happens, she's right there, always with a smile. I don't know if I've ever seen her upset or anything of that nature, but I just want to publicly recognize Sue for her outstanding work, her dedication to children, and at senior staff, she always reminds us of the parent and what parents are seeing and what needs to happen and what our communications look when we send something out to families and what it's about. So, Sue, thank you for that, and I know that you will have some time to care and spend with the triplets, and we all know the triplets, Hope, Joy, and Grace, and your husband. And so we just want to say thank you for a job well done. And now you will have time to focus on those wonderful hobbies that you have, antiquing and going and selling those antiques and collecting. So thank you for a job well done. You truly make all of us MPS proud. We don't know what we're going to do without you. But Sue, so thank you.
Sue, would you like to comment?
Thank you, President Peterson and Dr. Posley, members of the board, and my esteemed colleagues in the audience and listening. That is truly humbling to hear those nice words. And I wanted to say that in the last 25 years, I've appreciated working with the board, working with the superintendents, working with the Office of Board Governance, and all my esteemed colleagues, some of whom are in the audience. I've worked for 4 superintendents and many board members, and during that time, I've seen many good things happen due to those different entities in the Office of Board Governance. I've worked very closely with them, with Dr. Mann and Ryan and Jill and Jean before, and the many staff members over there, and I've valued that relationship also. I started out as, but I've seen so many good things happen as a result of all of you, and I wanted to thank you for that. As Dr. Posley said, my kids are in MPS, so I am appreciative of the education they're getting and the many opportunities in the classroom, through the rec department. Everybody's really gone above and beyond at the school, so I want to be thankful to all of you for that. And when I came to MPS, I'd been a high school English teacher for 11 years, and when I came to MPS, it was kind of interesting. I was doing an internship to become a principal, And I called, out of the blue, I called Mr. A. I didn't know him, and I had to find my own internship. And he said to me just a few weeks ago he didn't know if he was going to take an intern, but he told me way back that the staff talked him into taking an intern, but now he said that he decided he was going to take an intern. And he said, then he talked me into continuing being a teacher at Fritchie, and I became the learning coordinator there. And then he brought me with him to central office when he became the superintendent. And ever since then, I've really felt valued working for MPS. And that's thanks to all of you, prior board members, my colleagues, Office of Board Governance, the different superintendents I've worked for. So I just really want to thank you. And also my husband, John, and my family for all the time, I've been here. They've been really supportive, and my husband, John, used to listen. Dr. Mann will remember when we had WYMS, and probably many of you also, that the board meetings, he would listen to see when I was coming home. And he would always, he knew a lot about what was happening because of that, too. And I also can't forget the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, because we've worked together on a lot of projects also, and I've really valued that. So thank you for all that you do on behalf of the children of Milwaukee Public Schools and all the hours you put in, and my colleagues, Office of Board Governance, Accountability, Superintendent. And we can't forget David. But thank you, and thank you for this recognition. It was truly humbling, and I think it's the first standing ovation that I've ever received. So thank you.
Well deserved, thank you.
Now I know why Dr. Posley wanted me to sit up here. But thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Any comments from the board? Yes, Vice President Taylor.
I'm a little surprised, but I just want to say thank you, Sue, for always being available. Especially you help us with like our pre-meetings before our meetings, and I know I am one that often can create a couple of challenges, but you always waver through with a smile and always available to change up some times or dates if needed. You're definitely going to be missed. I will ask you to stay, but it looks like you're gung-ho on leaving. And so enjoy yourself and know that you absolutely did a great job here, and you will be remembered many more years to come.
Thank you, Director Taylor. And I came across a file about the TEMA exchange. And if you ever need any help on that, let me know, because I think
Be
that's a
going
great
for it. I will.
program.
Thank you.
It's a great program.
Director Herndon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to say I'm going to feel lost because I've aggravated her for years in her position. And then I became a board member, and she's always been so helpful, teach me the ropes, and then with those pre-meetings, which are just a chore for her, I understand that. And I've always been so appreciative because, Sue, you always did it with a great smile. And when I saw that you were retiring, I spoke to you and I said, you'll probably not retire, but I know that there are many things that you'd like to do in your free time. So I accept that you're leaving, even though I really hate that you are. So enjoy.
Thank you, Director Herndon. And I do remember when Director Herndon, she was in the audience and she would be testifying and pushing for causes and on behalf of the children. And now she's on this side, and she's really, all of you have dedicated so much. I've seen it in the community before you were board members, during, and beyond with board members I worked with previously. So thank you for those nice comments.
Dr. Halloran.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations. And I love seeing the triplets. And, I just saw them at the run back to school. And I know that your whole family, it makes us all MPS, including your husband. I think I saw him at Fernwood one of the days. So, I know your commitment to MPS. We just appreciate your service and appreciate your whole family. And thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Director O'Halloran.
Director Carr.
I just want to say congratulations. Thank you for your years of service. I personally have not had the opportunity to work with you. I missed it, but I hope you're still available for some advice. But what I will say is that in the time that I've been in this role, we've had a couple encounters, and I've always witnessed your beautiful spirit, always smiling, always in great spirits, and I will definitely miss that. So thank you for all your years of service. Congratulations, and go live.
Thank you, Director Carr. I really appreciate that.
Matt Chasen.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. Sue, I think it's been transparent to anyone who's ever had the pleasure of interacting with you how authentic you are as an individual. And it's been clear that your motivation has always been about the best interests of the organization. I want to make sure that you are recognized tonight for that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure working with you in your office. And those comments are very appreciated.
Director Leonard.
So yes, thank you, but I'm going to put a little bit of humor into this because I run by your house very often. Now I believe that pond will be finished. Many of you don't know what I'm talking about. There is a rather deep hole in front of her house that's meant to be a pond. And I just was curious when that would be done. I'm just giving you a hard time, sorry. Thank you, Sue.
Well, that's interesting. It's been 3 years, and my husband dug it himself. Most people would have someone do it for them, but he said it was therapeutic, but at the end, he wasn't so excited about it. But it's been that way for 3 years, and now he's open to me project managing some stuff at home instead of at work. So, he wanted to do it his way, but now he's really open to me kind of pushing the project forward.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it will get done then. And I wanted to add that I know you came to work here at Central Services with Superintendent Andrikopoulos, and I'd say that amongst the many good things that he did was bring you here and then left you here to help the subsequent superintendents in their activities. And you have been a backbone for many of our boards and superintendents. So thank you. It goes way back.
Thank you, President Peterson. It's been a pleasure working with you. I remember working with you when you were in the schools, and then as the board president or the union MTA president, and then now here. So it's been great, and I really appreciate your comments and working with you, being
Thank you.
able to.
Okay, Madam Secretary, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Sue is the glue, right? Sue does a lot of things that people are unaware of. And so, like many of you, I'm a little bit concerned that she's retiring, but I'm happy for her. She has worked hard with a smile. Every time I have an encounter with Sue, it's always very pleasant. She's always very knowledgeable and very helpful. Many times Sue will call in anticipation of things that are about to come based on her years of service and understanding what needs to happen. And I am so very thankful for that. He knows how we are about deadlines, so thank you. I appreciate that. Sue, you will definitely be missed, and so not to be sad, but I'm going to say I'll see you soon, right? Not goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mann. That means a lot. I have appreciated working with you and your office and your staff. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
How about one last round of applause? Not last, but round of applause for Sue. Thank you. Madam Secretary, what's the next communication?
The next communication is action on a request to approve the 2021-22 proposed fall budget adjustments to the adopted FY22 budget. The recommendation is that the board adopt the fall budget changes as proposed and that the annual budgetary resolutions be adopted as indicated in attachment number 2 to this item.
Madam Secretary, we will defer this item to the end of the meeting.
So noted.
Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Board Governance?
Yes, Mr. President. We do have 2 communications from the Office of Board Governance. The first communication from the Office of Board Governance is the preliminary report related to the development of an election district apportionment plan for the elections of members of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 119.08, Parent 1. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the board clerk please present the report?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Wisconsin statutes, section 119.08, election of board members specify that the board shall consist of 1 member elected at large and 8 members elected from numbered election districts determined by the board. The election districts shall be substantially equal in population, and the boundaries of the election districts shall be drawn so as to reflect a balanced representation of citizens in the areas of the city. Relative to the timeline in which the board has to do its redistricting, within 60 days after the Common Council of the city enacts on its ordinance determining the boundaries of the automatic districts in the city, following the federal decennial census under subsection 62.08, Parent 1, the board shall, by vote of a majority of the membership of the board, adopt an election district apportionment plan for the election of board members, which shall be effective until the city enacts a new ordinance. So it'll be in effect until the next time there's a redistricting process. In conversation with the city clerk, the Common Council may act on the automatic districts around the middle of November, which would then start the 60-day timeline for the board to act on the board districts. We've been in continuous conversations with the city clerk and the Legislative Reference Bureau because we want to ensure that the board meets a statutory timeline for redistricting and making sure that as soon as the Common Council acts, that we're able to bring a more definitive timeline to the board around its plan. Attached to this item is a preliminary timeline for the board to begin its redistricting process. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to take a look at that and understand that that is a preliminary draft of a timeline because we don't have the date yet from the Common Council as they are still waiting on some information from the county. So as the ball rolls forward, and we are walking along the process with the city to ensure that the minute that they are slated to take action, we will be bringing an item to the board relative to the redistricting process and timeline.
Thank you. Does the board wish to make any comments? Okay. Madam Secretary, what's the next communication?
The next communication from the Office of Board Governance is the monthly report on the legislative affairs affecting Milwaukee Public Schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Okay, always an optimistic report coming with this. Would the board clerk please present your comments?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we do have Mr. Chris Thiel here at the podium to be able to present the report for this month.
Thank you. Mr. Thiel.
President Peterson, members of the board, Chris Thiel, Office of Governmental Relations. Just 2 quick updates. In our past meetings, we talked about the fact that coming out of
We unfortunately did not see the special education funding that the governor had proposed in his budget. But just to make clear, as you may be talking to constituents or as the administration and we all are advocating for these policies and continue to do so during the remainder of this legislative session, we are anticipating that we will end this fiscal year with a balance of about $1.2 billion and the end of the next fiscal year with about $930 million. And I make the point of separating those two things out to make the point that we could sustain funding very easily for some of the proposals that we've talked about in the past. So our hope is, and obviously I think we've all been watching the legislative process at the state, but as the governor continues to advocate for these policies, there's still time in this legislative session to at least make the attempt to put some of these funds in order for school districts that not only MPS students need, but students need across the state. So the good news there is the funds are available. At the federal level, if you've been following the discussion over the last several months, we've been talking about the Build Back Better proposal and the infrastructure bill. We had some action today in Washington, D.C., where the president again urged Congress, and specifically the Democrats in Congress, to move forward, and he introduced some proposals. We've seen some legislative text by the end of today, and they are still talking about a plan that will be in the neighborhood of $1.7 trillion, which could be transformational in a lot of ways once we see the detail. What we do know, at least now for sure, is that those early childhood pieces that we advocate for, we've advocated for at the state level, at the federal level, the K-3 funding, K-4 funding, birth to 5 funding that the superintendent and the board have been pushing over the last 3 or 4 years, that emphasis remains in the package that's being discussed. So there's not a hard and fast deadline for them to get this work done, and as we tease out the details, it'll be very exciting, I think, to see how much potential there is to help the families in other areas outside of education, specifically in Milwaukee, but those education pieces specifically remain there, and I think will remain there now that we're this far down the line. So that's the good news that we have on that front. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I was just looking at some of the Build Back Better that got back, or that stayed in the framework that was released today, knowing that some pieces did get cut out. But it's not just about pre-K. It's also really exciting to see that they're putting millions into the educator pipeline funding. And so for principals and residencies and PD, it's a really exciting package, and I think it has the potential to be transformative. They also talk about child nutrition, $250 million in grants to improve the nutritional quality, and $30 million for school kitchen equipment grants. And so it's really exciting, and I hope people are paying attention because this could be really transformational for our students. So thank you for this update, and that's all.
Any other comments? Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have the monthly report with possible action on activities with the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the Office of Accountability and Efficiency wish to present the report?
Thank you, Chair Peterson, Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. That report is before you. I'd like to just briefly highlight this month that the OAE team was able to begin their strategic data project with Harvard University's Center for Educational Policy Research. I want to thank the board for their support of this. It's going to be an opportunity that affords my team access to thought leaders and experts in the data sciences, ideally towards the support of building the capacity of the skills on my team towards impactful and transformative data projects in the district. So thank you.
Okay. Madam Secretary, what is the next item of business?
The next item of business is the reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to accept, modify, or reject the report of the independent hearing officers of the dates and times listed in our agenda. I assume we want a motion before we have discussion, is that
So noted.
Director Carr? Okay, we have the motion made. We need a second at this point?
Yes, you would need a second.
Okay, Director Garcia.
Director Garcia. So, just to be clear on the motion, the motion is to accept the report of the independent hearing officers?
Yeah.
So noted.
Let us hear from the administration.
President Peterson, members of the board, Matthew Boswell, Senior Director of the Department of Student Services. So yes, I bring to you the monthly expulsion cases to be accepted by the board, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have in reference to it.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the administration on this matter? Director Carr?
Yes, thank you, Chair, President Peterson, yep. I have a question relative to the expulsion summaries. Just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, those that are expelled for a year and then they're able to return back to the district?
Administration.
President Peterson, members of the board, that is correct. However, IHO officer, which is an independent hearing officer, can adjust that year expulsion at any time. And all of our students in the Milwaukee Public Schools, it was expelled with educational services.
A follow-up question, Director Carr?
No, thank you.
Any other questions or comments by the board? I just have one. If you could just give us some examples of the educational services that you just referred to.
President Peterson and members of the board, those educational services can be of a variety of nature, depending on the student code of conduct, once again. And you try to align the services with the need of the students, or it can be just for general educational services at various locations that we have throughout the city to assign students.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Secretary, will you please call the roll?
On Director Carr's motion to approve the report, to accept the reports of the independent hearing officers, seconded by Director Garcia. Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Vice President Taylor? And President Peterson?
Aye.
That's 8 ayes. The motion passes.
Very good. We will now have reports of the standing committee. Since the public hearing was given at committee meetings, the board, as is customary, will not be giving public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item number 2, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside at the request of President Peterson.
Okay, Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
Mr. Chair, are there any other board members that wish to set an item aside from this report?
Thank you. I knew I was missing something. Are there any other board members who would like to set an item aside that is from this report?
I would just like to echo President Peterson's statement about setting number 2 aside for further discussion.
So noted.
Any other items? Director Herndon.
I'd like to set aside number 11. That is the nutrition program item.
Thank you. Any other item from the Committee of the Accountability Finance Personnel? Okay, so we have item 2 and item 11. Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report is from the report on the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items be set aside from this? Seeing none, we'll move to the next. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Budget. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside? Seeing none, we'll move along. Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report is that from the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. That is the next report set aside. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Okay, do any board members wish any items from this committee, SASE committee, to be set aside? Seeing done, we would like a motion now to act on the balance of the reports of the standing committees. That's everything except what withheld. Director Taylor has made that motion. Do I have a second? Director O'Halloran has seconded that. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
On Director Taylor's motion to move approval of the balance of the reports of the standing committees, seconded by Director O'Halloran. Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Vice President Taylor? Aye. And President Peterson?
Aye.
That's 8 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what's the next item?
Mr. President, we are now back to the items that were set aside. The first item set aside is from the report of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, and that is item number 2. Action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days. This item has been set aside at the request of President Peterson. The recommendation from the administration is that the board authorize the promotions, reassignments, decreases and increases in salary, and appointments to the classifications indicated in the attachments to this item. And 2, approve the LTE contracts exceeding 60 days pursuant to administrative policy 6.23 parent 4 parent B to be effective as indicated.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi?
I move we go into closed session.
Okay. The motion is to retire to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, parent 1, parent C. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Chair, we do need a second on that motion.
Could I have Director Carr, second? Thank you, Madam Secretary.
On Director Gokul Gandhi's motion to retire to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent C, which allows a governmental body to go into closed session to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Seconded by Director Carr. Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Vice President Taylor? And President Peterson?
Aye.
That's 8 ayes, the motion passes.
Board will now retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C, which allows a governmental body to go into closed session to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. The board will return to open session to continue the discussion and take action. Madam Secretary, please note the time.
So noted.
session. The board has been in a closed session. Is there any additional discussion? What is the pleasure of the board with respect to the personnel item discussed in closed session? Director O'Halloran.
I move we accept administration's recommendations.
Director Garcia. Second. It's been moved and seconded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion, seconded by Director Garcia,
Yes.
moving approval of item number 2, which was set aside from the Accountability, Finance, and Personnel Committee, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments and reclassifications, the salary increases and decreases, and the limited term employment contract exceeding 60 days. On the motion to approve the administration's recommendation, Director Carr,
No.
Director Garcia,
Yay.
Director Gokul Gandhi,
Yes.
Director Herndon,
Yes.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director O'Halloran,
Aye.
Vice President Taylor. Aye. And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 1 no. The motion passes.
Point of personal privilege, I'd like Director O'Halloran to say something.
Continuing the tradition of Director Phillips, I want to thank everybody and congratulate you on your new appointments or assignments. Thank you for bringing your talents to serve the students of MPS. Go forth and do great things.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what's the next item?
The next item that was set aside is from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, item number 11, the report with possible action on the MPS school nutrition program. This item was set aside by Director Herndon.
Director Herndon, would you please ask or make a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I received a document, and I think it was today, related to this item and a request for additional information that had been made that was to be reported, which is why I asked that it be pulled. And my request was that this information become part of the record for this particular item and shared with all of our board because it is it outlines the seriousness of the deficiencies in the kitchens of the district, which was one of the issues and one of the items that we had some discussion, lengthy discussions over the past couple of years, but more recently in the budgeting, I think I was one of those that brought up the question of the cost. And I think there should be a cost attached to the needs of refurbishing our kitchens or adding additional equipment to our kitchens as we look at the needs to accommodate the requests from the public in terms of the quality of the fruits, the vegetables, and the meals that are served to the students. The equipment within the kitchens or enhanced facilities are probably required, and that needs to be addressed, which is why I pointed that out. I would look to Madam Secretary to see how we proceed with my request of asking that this document be shared with the remainder of the board and some discussion moving forward. It could be in the forms of a resolution of some sort if need be. I'm not making that determination at this point, but definitely we need some dollars added to this document.
Thank you, Director Herndon. Administration, would you care to respond?
President Peterson and members of the board, we'll be more than happy to have this added and also more than happy to address this at our next update when we give our next nutrition update. Could make this a part of it and go through it at that time, or however the board wishes to move forward with this, we are open to do it.
Okay, then that's good.
President Peterson and members of the board, we do not have costs tonight, but we can have that available as well on our next nutrition update with the cost associated with in order to bring all of this up to standard.
Thank you very much. That's what I was asking for as to why I asked this to be held.
Mr. Chair, this item was a report. The next item, we are back to the communication from the superintendent, which was previously deferred, and that would be action on a request to approve the 21-22 FY22 proposed fall budget adjustments to the adopted FY22 budget. The recommendation is that the board adopt the fall budget changes as proposed and that the annual budgetary resolutions be adopted as indicated in the attachment to this item.
Dr. Posley, would you please present this item?
Yes, President Peterson and members of the board, we're requesting your approval of the FY22 budget adjustment before you, as well as annual budget resolutions. Thank you for your support and guidance during the fall budget process, especially relative to the time devoted to the ESSER 3 funding. And at this time, I'm going to ask Martha Kreisman for some comments. Martha?
President Peterson, members of the board, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The total adjusted all funds budget is over $2 billion. This is an increase of over $770 million compared to the spring budget due to the inclusion of ESSER funds. You can see this change in Chart 12 of the Attachment 1, which provides the changes by funds from the May adopted budget to the October amended budget. Each fall, the budget is adjusted based on September 3rd Friday enrollment and certified state aid, which is the bigger portion of the revenue limit for MPS. The revenue limit is made up of state aid and the property tax levy. Based on the updated information, the tax levy is set through the attached resolution. The revenue limit is almost $893 million. The revenue limit is inclusive of our School Operations Fund, School Nutrition Services Fund, and Construction Fund. It also includes the district's portion of the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. The $893 million is made up of state aid in the amount of almost $617 million and property tax levy in the amount of almost $276 million. State aid has increased over $37 million from last year due to the referendum and increased shared costs. The Extension Fund, which lies outside of the revenue limit, has revenue from property taxpayers in the amount of $29.7 million. That brings the total property tax to $306 million for Milwaukee Public Schools, which is shown in Chart 5 on page 1-4 of Attachment 1. Milwaukee Public Schools state aid is reduced by $22.8 million to pay for 9.6% of the costs of the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. This percentage will reduce each year by 3.2 percentage points until the program is fully funded by state general purpose revenues. Chart 2 shows the deduction for the choice program. Since this lowers our state aid, Then our property tax increases to fill the gap that is left. The state offsets this increase to the property tax through the poverty aid the district receives of $3.9 million. The impact then for the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program to the tax levy is $18.9 million. Lynn Rule will now provide some more detail about fall adjustments.
Hello, President Peterson, members of the board. I'm Lynn Rule, Director of Financial Planning and Budget Services. While the state biennial budget provided no increase to school districts' base per pupil amounts that make up each district's revenue limit this year or next year, Milwaukee Public Schools' base per pupil for the revenue limit did increase by about $768 due to our successful recurring referendum. Attachment 1 also provides details of increases and decreases to expenditures from the spring budget to the fall adjustments in the School Operations Fund, with net changes equaling almost $16.9 million. The bulk of the changes was due to school and school accounts with an increase of $19 million. There were no changes in the construction fund or school nutrition fund. There was, however, an increase of $2.5 million to the extension fund, mostly for facilities. Chart 9, 10, and 11 in Attachment 1 provide an outline of the position increases, decreases, or changes for school operations, categorical, nutrition, and extension funds. We are available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, do you have any comments? Do you have any comments on this? And board members, do you have any comments? Does anyone wish to make a motion? Yes. Is your mic green when you talk?
Are you able to hear me now?
Better, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Director Gokul-Gandhi.
I move to approve the budget for the construction, the extension fund? No.
First, what we need to do is make a motion to divide the question, I think.
Oh, I move that we divide the question.
Okay.
So noted.
Do we need a second for that?
We do.
Director O'Halloran is seconded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on just dividing the question so we can vote on them separately.
Thank you very much. On Director Gokul-Gandhi's motion to divide the question in order to vote on the resolution concerning the construction funds separately from that of the operations and extension funds, seconded by Director O'Halloran. Director Carr.
I don't know what I'm voting on. I apologize. Please forgive me. Can we break that down a little more?
Yes,
Madam
Mr. Chair,
Secretary.
members of the board. Each year, the board votes on 3 funds relative to the tax levy: the school operations fund and the extension funds, and also the construction funds, right? It is separated because the other 2 votes could be passed on a majority vote, but the construction fund by statute requires a 2/3 majority vote in order for that fund to be passed.
Very good. So please call the roll, Madam Secretary.
On the motion to divide the question so that the board has the opportunity to vote separately on the construction fund, but the vote will be together on the school operations fund and on the extension fund. On the motion as read into the record, Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Vice President Taylor? And President Peterson?
Aye.
That's 8 ayes, the motion passes.
Okay, Madam Secretary, what's the next step, item of business?
The next step in the process is to read the resolutions into the record so that the board understands exactly what is being voted on.
Madam Secretary, would you please read the resolutions for the Operation Extension Funds?
The first resolution is for the operations funds. That resolution reads, resolved that pursuant to the provisions of Section 119.46 Wisconsin statutes relating to the school operations funds, the Board of School Directors hereby advises the Common Council that the amount of $1,108,020,898 will be required for the operations of the Milwaukee Public Schools for the repair and keeping in order of school buildings and equipment, and the making of material improvements to school property during the 2022 fiscal year. In addition, pursuant to action taken by the Board of School Directors at its regular meeting on September 22nd of 2011, the Board of School Directors is required to advise the Common Council that $18,891,246 will be required for the operations of the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, and that $254,169,431 will be required for the operations of the Milwaukee Public Schools, and that a total of $273,060,677 thereof is to be raised by a tax levy on all real and personal property in the city of Milwaukee, subject to taxation for Milwaukee Public Schools purposes in 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 65.07, Parent 1, Parent E, Wisconsin statutes, said amount to be raised by tax levy being in addition to the money to be received from state aid, shared taxes, and from other miscellaneous sources. Relative to the Extension Fund, resolved that pursuant to the provisions of Section 119.47 Wisconsin statutes relating to the Extension Fund, the Board of School Directors hereby advises the Common Council that the amount of $37,339,247 will be required for the maintenance of playgrounds, recreation centers, and similar activities during the 22 fiscal year, and that $29,725,000 thereof is to be raised by a tax levy on all real and personal property in the city of Milwaukee, subject to taxation for the Milwaukee Public Schools purposes in 2022, pursuant to the provisions of Section 65.07, Parent 1, Parent G, Wisconsin statutes, and said amount being required in addition to other miscellaneous sources.
May I have a motion on the resolutions as read by the Secretary? Director Taylor? Okay, and we need a second. Director Gokul Gandhi is seconding it. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Taylor's motion to approve the resolutions for the FY22 budget resolutions for the school operations and extension funds, seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi, as read into the record. Director Carr.
No.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor. Aye. And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 1 no. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, will you please read the resolution for the construction fund?
The resolution for the construction fund reads as follows. Resolved that pursuant to the provisions of Section 119.48 Wisconsin statutes, the Board of School Directors hereby advises the Common Council that the amount of $4,049,797 will be required for the FY '22 fiscal year construction fund budget purposes, and that it is to be provided in accordance with Section 65.07, Parent 1, Parent F, Wisconsin statutes, and that $2,923,868 by a tax levy on all real and personal property in the city of Milwaukee, subject to taxation for the Milwaukee Public Schools purposes in 2022, and said amount to be in addition to monies received from other miscellaneous sources.
May I have a motion on the resolution as read by the secretary? Director Garcia, seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Garcia's motion to approve resolution, the resolution for the construction fund for the 21-22 budget year. Resolution on the construction fund, seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi. On the resolution as read into the record, Director Carr.
No.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor. And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 1 no. The motion passes.
We now have a budget for FY '22. I would like to thank the administration, particularly the finance and budget team, for their diligent efforts to craft a budget that will serve the needs of our students and staff. I also want to thank the students, families, employees, and members of the general public who participated in our survey efforts and listening sessions, sent us suggestions. Your input was invaluable to the board. Madam Secretary, are there any items of regular business?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have 2 items of regular business. And the first one is the report of the board's delegate. The first report is that of the board's delegate to the Title I District Advisory Council.
Delegate, would you like to report?
That report is before you, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Just a quick reminder that that's from June and not from last month.
Madam Secretary, what's the next report, please?
The next report is the report of the board's delegate to the Head Start Policy Council, and that is Director Simpson, and that report is before you.
Okay. Madam Secretary, what's the next item of
The
regular
next
business?
item of regular business would be the report of the President of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
That report, both for September and October, is before you. Madam Secretary, are there any items of unfinished business?
Mr. President, we have no items of unfinished business.
Madam Secretary, are there any items of a new business for referral to committee?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have 1 item of new business for referral, and that item is action on a request to revise Administrative Policy 6.33, Clinical Education, Student Teaching, Student Administrator, and Field Placement Students.
We'll refer that to the Committee of Legislative Rules and Policies. Madam Secretary, are there any communications for referral to committees?
Mr. Chair, we have no communications for referral.
Madam Secretary, are there any resolutions for referral to committee?
Mr. Chair, this month we have no resolutions.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. Chair, that was the last item on this meeting's agenda.
There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.